Hey, welcome. This is Nat20's first actual miniatures painting tutorial. We're going to start with the basics. I've already shown you how to do some terrain, and that was kind of advanced. I shouldn't have started with that for our program. But today I want to discuss paints. Everybody thinks that you really need to use really expensive paints to pull off some fantastic paint jobs, and I'm here to tell you that's not actually the case. There are instances where you need to use expensive paints, but most of the time you can get away with using stuff from your local craft store, Walmart, etc. Before we go on, I'm going to show you a couple pieces that I've actually done primarily in cheap paints so you can get an idea of why I say you don't need the expensive stuff. This is one of my pieces. It's a Blue Dragon. I believe it's Narthrax from the Bones 2 line. But I painted him up as a blue dragon. They had a kind of purplish tinge to him, and you can see there that I've got great detail and everything. Most of this is the paints I'm going to show you here in just a little while. Here's another piece that I'm very proud of. Once again, using just the inexpensive paints that you can get at Walmart and Michael's. There are a couple things I use that I do suggest that you use expensive paints for, and we'll get around to that here in a couple minutes. If you take a good look there, you can see his eyes. I'll show you tips and tricks on how to get all of this as you go along. One of my favorite pieces. Now, just so you know, most of this was actually done with paints like this. This is Craft Smart. I believe that's one that you get from Walmart. Just simple acrylic paint. Apple Barrel, I know you get at Walmart. Or maybe not. I buy my stuff at Walmart and Michael's mostly. As a matter of fact, in my mausoleum and graveyard tutorial, this was the tan I used for one of the two stoneworks. But then I do use some more expensive stuff. Most of my metallics are either from Vallejo or Formula P3, which is Privateer Press. These were made for War Machine and Hordes. And Citadel. I use a lot of the Citadel shades for my washes, which basically allows you to get highlights and lowlights pretty easily. I buy these because the colors are very good and you don't have to mix them up yourself. But this is just a real quick beginning to the series to let you know we don't have to spend hundreds of dollars on your painting supplies. I mean, these three paints ran me, I think, $2 total. So before you go out and waste $100 on good paints, you can start out with these, and as I do my painting tutorials, I'll show you what I'm talking about on those. I'm going to pause for a second because I didn't get a couple things on the table. I'm going to discuss basing and prep, and we'll do that before we move on. Okay, when you get your minis, they're either going to be a plastic or a metal finish. Recently, Paizo Press has released some D&D minis, which are a gray plastic with some clear plastic on them. They say they can be painted right out of the box. They say that about Bones as well, and most of the Reaper stuff. I personally feel that everything needs to have a base coat, a good primer on it. Main reason for that is, even though you can paint most of these directly out of the box, you need to have a primer which is designed to stick to your materials and thereby give you a better finish. Well, not a better finish, a tougher finish. Since I'm posting this in the Reaper Minis forum and most of what I do is Reaper miniatures, we're going to start with one of those. This is one of the were creatures from the Lycanthropes expansion from Bones 3. We've been calling him the Warmadillo around the house. But as you see, they start out as a white plastic, and like I say, you can paint them directly, but you got to do a couple steps, honestly, to do competition level painting, honestly. The first thing I'm going to recommend before we even get to the primer and everything is you got to clean it. I use Simple Green. You can get this at your local hardware store or Walmart. It's about $10 for a gallon, but Simple Green has a lot of uses. I have gone through maybe 2 gallons in the last 3 years, and that's for prepping minis. And the advantage to Simple Green is if you mess something up, or you're not happy with a paint job, you paint something and then realize that your skills have increased to the point where you're not happy with your old paint job, you can literally take it, soak it in the Simple Green, take a toothbrush, scrub the paint off, and start from scratch. Simple Green doesn't damage the minis, doesn't do anything except really eat the paint off it. Additionally, when I get a mini and get started, doesn't matter what material it is, I start with the Simple Green and I basically dunk the mini and then swish it around. For some of the bigger pieces, you need to do more than just that, but then rinse it off, and it gets rid of the mold release. When they mold these, they spray them down with a sticky or slick material, depends on which process they're using, but it allows the mold to pop off without destroying the piece underneath. As a result, you've got a thin layer of this material between your paint and the miniature, and since it's designed to allow these to come out of the molds, it prevents paint from actually sticking. And if you don't clean them, you'll find yourself regretting it later. That's why I recommend the Simple Green. Just a dunk, rinse, and you're good to go. Make sure it's dry and you're ready to go. After that, you've got any number of materials that you can use to base coat your minis. A lot of people swear by Army Painter. You can order this online, get it from your local gaming store. Some hobby shops carry it. But there's several different lines of spray paints that are good for priming. Army Painter, P3 again, that's the Privateer Press line, and the Citadel Army primers are all very good, and they come in a variety of colors. So if you've got a piece that you know is going to be green, like a green dragon, you can buy a green spray paint to start out with. I've had some people ask me about the latex paints from Michaels that are used for spray painting canvases before you start. I don't recommend those. They're not very good primer material. They don't stick well to primers, and as you work, you'll find that it rubs off pretty easily, and you'll end up having to do a lot more work on the piece than you anticipated. I've got a couple pieces up here that I've done it with, including Conjura the World Breaker, which when we get the website up, which will be www.savagelightstudios.com/nat20, we'll have our portfolio up there so you can see a lot of what we've done. But honestly, what I recommend for priming, get that out of the other camera, is Vallejo Surface Primer. It comes in a couple colors. I think there's white, gray, and black. I only use the black, and I'll explain that here in a minute. It is their acrylic polyurethane, and this is the bottle. You can pick this up on Amazon for about $20. If you're lucky and have a local retailer that sells it. I believe Hobby Lobby sells it, and some of the Vallejo paints, which at the end of this, I'll go ahead and grab my Vallejo set so you can see the really high-end paints. But this is an acrylic polyurethane primer, which is tough as nails. Turns out black. Here is Gourmand after being primed. The advantage to this is if you've got an airbrush, and you can go up to Harbor Freight, and if you look there, I need to hit him a little bit more, but you can go up to Harbor Freight and pick up an airbrush and compressor for about $100. With a quick change compressor goes really fast. But this is pretty much airbrush ready right out of the bottle. You don't have to thin it, put it in, you're good to go. Once it's open, though, you do need to strain it before using an airbrush because particulate will clog your airbrush up, but that's for another tutorial. It's tough as nails. A lot of people will prime a metal figure or a plastic figure, and when you rub it, it starts to come off, and I've had that problem with some of the others. But as you can see, I'm rubbing pretty hard. Not even a dent. But like I say, the Vallejo Surface Primer is by far the best, but I have used the Army Painter on quite a few pieces, and I've also used the Citadel spray paints. They're very good for what they are. Now, the last thing, well, before I get to the last thing, which is sealing, and we'll show that, we'll show the full process in another tutorial, is your choice of primer colors. It honestly depends on what you're planning on doing. A piece like this, which is my Blue Dragon, I started with a dark purple for my base to help give definition to the dragon scales. But with something like this or Gourmand, if you know that most of the piece is going to be a single color, then priming it in a color is a pretty good bet. But if you're not sure, or it's going to be something like my Bugbear here, who has many different colors, I recommend going with a black base coat, at least when you're starting out. And the main reason for that is black forgives a multitude of sins. If you're painting and you miss something with black, it doesn't stand out in a glaring way. If you miss a little bit, then the black will actually hide it quite a bit. Meanwhile, if you have a stark white for your base coat, if you miss something, that stark white is going to show every little spot you miss. And I guarantee you will miss things. I miss things, and like I say, I'm a competition level painter. You guys have seen my work in the Reaper Minis group. This is an example. Oops, getting him aligned with the lens is a little difficult there. But I guarantee even on this piece, I missed a couple spots. I know that for a fact. But he is base coated in black, so you can't really tell. And that's the main reason I go with the Vallejo black. Also, sometimes it's really difficult to find the gray or white primers if you want to use them. But the 250 milliliter bottle normally runs about, it's 200 milliliters, normally runs about $20 on Amazon. Totally worth it. And the other advantage to this is, unlike these other spray primers, you can brush this on. This figure, for instance, I didn't feel like, this is the only one I didn't have primed at the time. I didn't feel like breaking out my airbrush for a single piece, so took a couple drops and painted it on. So this is very utilitarian. The last thing I'm going to talk about is sealing materials. A lot of people will tell you when you're done, just spray them down with a matte varnish, and that's fine if you're just doing showpieces. But if you intend to take these anywhere, if they're not going to be sitting in your living room, then I really highly recommend that you do a two-part seal. This one, which I've shown you a couple times now, I tried a new technique where I actually dipped it in a polyurethane seal and then used my airbrush without a paint pot on it to blow the excess off, and it encased it in a ridiculously strong and hard shell of polyurethane, and then I used a matte sealer on it. This one, on the other hand, I used an acrylic spray on to get the seal, and then used a matte varnish. And for the acrylic sprays, I am literally using Rust-Oleum's crystal clear enamel, and you can get a very thin coat very quickly with this. And well, easiest way to explain this is the shinier the material, the tougher it is. So polyurethane, clear enamel, all will give you a very good, hard protective seal on your minis. And like I say, if it's anything like, and I'll post pictures of it later, if it's anything like my show shelf, stuff stays there, it's not really a big deal. But if you're planning on taking these anywhere, if you're going to a gaming store, if you're doing any war gaming or playing D&D with them, then you really should have more protection on them. And a crystal clear enamel will do very well with that. And then you can follow it up with your favorite non-gloss anti-shine. Most of them, do I have another can of this? Yeah, I do. Most of them are a matte varnish. And I swear by the Army Painter Anti-Shine matte varnish. And when I get to that tutorial, a little bit goes a long way. When I say a little bit goes a long way, I've got looking here up on my shelf, I've got the Dungeons & Dragons 1 in 5,000 Red Dragon. I've got Dragons Don't Share, Conjura the World Breaker, Nethermaul, 4 large pieces from Reaper and Citadel, Games Workshop, and then almost 100 individual small pieces, and that was one can of this. And like I said, I've got another one, and this runs about $10.99. Last thing I want to talk about is glues. Different glues have different uses. I will recommend, if you're doing mostly bones, order the Bones brand super glue. A lot of you have heard about the Kraken, how it is notoriously difficult to put together. My friend Allie took about 3 to 5 hours to put hers together with the Bones brand cyanoacrylate glue. And that cyanoacrylate is the term for any super glue. It's the super glue you buy at the dollar store, Gorilla Glue. Cyanoacrylate is honestly what's best for holding plastic, plastic metal, plastic to metal, resin to plastic, etc. But the Bones cyanoacrylate is actually a little more expensive than other brands, but my Kraken only took me 15 minutes to put together. This is just the basics, but I'm sure when I get to doing my painting a mini tutorial, I'll show you that I mostly use the cheap paints, and you can get a glorious finished product with these inexpensive paints. I'll see you in the next one, which will be how to paint a mini. It's probably going to be a 3-part series, very short tutorials, maybe 4, starting out with blocking, then shading, then dry brushing, detail, and finishing. And the finishing will be how to do a custom base, how to apply your finishing materials, how to seal it, and how to get it table ready. And when I say custom base, rocks, grass, etc. Thank you very much, and thank you for tuning in to Nat 20.